Mattel Electronics presents B-17 Bomb.
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is A Morning Somewhere for Friday, May 24th, 2024. Crushed it. My name is Bernie Burns, sitting right over there. She's on a first name basis with every circus you know about. It's Ashley Burns. How you doing, Ash?
Yeah, not too bad. Happy Friday. Happy Furiosa Day to those celebrating.
Hey, guys, it's Friday. We actually have a lot of stuff to talk about today, so follow-up Friday is going to be really, really short.
It's going to be a lightning round.
Luckily, we were so awesome all week long, we don't have much to follow up on. Hey, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking maybe we should have a different theme for Friday, or like maybe we were talking about refreshing the logo. This is a good follow-up Friday.
We did discuss this, yes.
Maybe have a different theme for Friday. How does this sound for Friday's theme song from now going forward?
Hit me with the brainstorm.
Friday.
Okay, here we go. I just have a couple of quick ones following up on things from earlier in the week. When we talked about, we went to Cirque du Soleil and we were talking about this guy who was really good with yo-yos. Turns out those specific kinds of yo-yos have a name. They're called Diabolo, also referred to as Chinese yo-yo.
They were going nuts in the Reddit, the subreddit, trying to figure out what the hell we were talking about.
Look, the thing is, we did try to look it up so that we could
looks
know
exactly like what we
were
described.
talking about. But it's when you Google like yo-yo that comes off the string, you don't get the kind of results that you're looking for. So thank you to the Reddit for setting us straight on that.
Listen, I was going to say, this is kind of a weird follow-up, something we kind of talked about, but it led to a different discussion. I want to say it was the feet discussion that we had at one point.
Okay,
and
here we go.
someone said, oh, someone did a great description of why people are like feet. Here's a link, and they had a YouTube link. And the immediate comment was,
I'm not watching that.
I'm not clicking an undisclosed YouTube link in a discussion about feet. Sorry, I'm just not doing that. Let me give you advice. If you want your search history to not matter whatsoever, start a podcast. My search history is insane.
My YouTube recommendations now are just a mishmash of garbage.
At some point in the future, we should just, to cover our bases, Ash, we should do a whole podcast episode about how to bury a body and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, look, that's why we were looking all that stuff up. That's why that happened.
Where are the nearest pigs? A couple of other follow-ups. I can name an athlete. I thought of
An Olympic athlete.
An Olympic athlete as soon as we finish recording the podcast. Simone Biles, the gymnast.
Is she competing, though, in this year? Didn't she, do a runner in the last Olympics? Didn't she quit the team events?
Well, now I think she might have withdrawn from some team stuff.
You have the wealth of human knowledge sitting in your lap.
I'm going to pull this up on the internet.
I will say this about that discussion. I said in one of the episodes this week, we were talking about the decline in the popularity of Olympics, and I said to Ashley off the cuff, can you name an Olympic athlete from any country who will be competing this summer in the Summer Olympics? And she couldn't come up with anybody, which is now she's saying Simone Biles. That is a discussion that I expected to get raked over the coals for. People are like, how could they not know this person? How could they not know that person? Nobody came up with anybody. I never heard about anyone having any problems with us saying that.
She did withdraw from some events in the Tokyo Olympics.
Right, but is she competing this year? That's the thing. That's what I want to know.
She is listed on the athletes to watch. So I guess so. I don't really know where.
Even the news, the internet's not sure either. I don't know. It's the Olympics. It might be a ski jump this year. We don't know what's happening. High dive, whatever.
Well, you know what though is we're seeing the fruits of Reddit already paying off with AI. Did you see some headlines about how? So Reddit inked a deal with OpenAI to train AI, I guess, on Reddit posts, which is going about as well as you can imagine.
Yeah, they're going to steal my shit posts.
There have already been some recipes out there suggesting you can add some non-toxic glue to pizza.
To keep the cheese on the pizza?
Yeah, it's stuff like that.
Because somebody made a Reddit post about that 7 years ago.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to that in the link because it's just quite fascinating to read, just that they're like, oh, it's going to be great, we'll get Reddit. You don't want that. You do not want that.
We didn't realize that everything we were saying on the internet was going to be used to train the next evolution of intelligent beings on this planet. ChatGPT also said, hide your kids, hide your wife.
So according to the internet, USA Today, Biles will be heading for the Olympics this year.
Heading for the Olympics. That could mean 1,000 things. But okay.
aiming to
assume
compete
she's-
in the Paris 2024 Olympics. I imagine it may have something to do with. Are they still doing qualifiers? Is that like how close up do you qualify for Olympic Games?
This whole conversation is literally me saying I know nothing about the Olympics this year. So anything you ask me, I'm going to be like,
Asking
I
lots of
don't
questions.
know.
Well, then let's just move right
Quick
along.
follow up. I did say Dan and Dan was the 1990s Reebok promotion. It was Dan and Dave. And I can't tell you which one didn't qualify, but it was like a year-long lead up. It was going to be this big showdown at the Olympics, and one of them didn't even make it.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. While we're talking about sports, though,
Yeah.
well, I got a news story. We'll talk about the NCAA settlement.
Okay.
Let's finish follow-up Friday first.
I'm gonna take us into a little bit of a transition, and that is follow up on something that we've discussed previously, but there are new developments on, and that is that this week Netflix released a first look at Liam Hemsworth as Geralt. We saw some of the like behind the scenes photos. Maybe
Leaked footage?
yeah, maybe that's prompted this release, but they actually put out like a very, very short teaser of Liam Hemsworth as Geralt, and he looks fine.
He looks totally fine.
Looks totally fine.
And I did make the comment that I felt like he was lore accurate. I'm speaking someone as purely who has approached Witcher from the video games and not from the books.
Sure.
Like there are people who are actually lore like intense and have read the books. I'm a video game guy,
Here's the weird thing,
and I feel like most people are in my. I feel like most people are in my camp.
probably.
Most people who have
Although
been
I
exposed
believe
to Witcher.
the author would disagree with you, as he's pretty sure his books made the games
It's
popular.
a wild journey with that dude, isn't it?
It is indeed. But I will say one weird thing about this teaser is, do you know who he reminded me of that I did not expect?
Was it me? Who was it?
Mad Mardigan from Willow. The
Oh.
character famously played by Val Kilmer. He's like this sellsword drunkard who's like kind of a lunatic, but you know, a heart of gold kind of thing. And maybe it's the like half up ponytail thing, but it just as he turns around and you see just sort of the profile to the camera, I just got huge Mad Mardigan vibes, and that actually put me even more on board.
Well, those of us who know him call him bad. But, Willow's an interesting franchise because it came out in the 80s and it was supposed to be the next Star Wars. Like they were building it. It was a Ron Howard thing and it was going to be huge, this huge, big, epic franchise. And it came out and everybody was like, but then over time, everyone was like, oh boy, Willow never got its due. It was never like, it could have been huge if it had just been given the time. And then they made a digital series for it. I was glad to see. Decades later, it came out, and everyone went, sometimes things are what they are.
Look, give it another decade, and it will be a treasured series. I do feel like the 80s maybe kind of had a tough time with a lot of more typical fantasy stuff. I mean, if you're gonna put Arnold Schwarzenegger in a loincloth, it's probably gonna work. But there was things like
I do it in my head all the time.
but things like Willow and Legend, and what was the one with the puppets that they also did another series of?
Dark Crystal?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, dude, there's a huge one right now. Dune. Dune couldn't get traction in the 80s.
Dune sort of walks the line. It's like sci-fantasy to me. But fantasy in particular, I feel like the 80s had kind of a tough
doing just
relationship
fantasy. Okay, yeah.
with. And
Don't forget Ice Pirates.
and of course, Ice Pirates.
Yeah, but Dune, they tried to make that big epic Dune, same kind of thing. They talked about it beforehand, like this is going to be the next big thing. You'll be talking about Dune for the rest of your life. And Dune is obviously very popular as a franchise. As a movie franchise, it did not land in the 80s.
They've done a lot of adaptations for Dune. There was the 80s movie, I believe in the early aughts, they did like a limited series, like a 1-season series for it. And
That's
now
not even on my radar. Where would they do a limited series in the early aughts?
I'll look that up. Dune series.
Was that like on ABC?
I'm going to say HBO.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, quickly branching off of the discussion about the Olympics, there was this settlement with the NCAA. Nearly $2.8 billion settlement, this is from AP News, has been approved by the NCAA and the nation's 5 largest conferences. The plan, which still needs approval from plaintiffs and a federal judge, calls for paying damages to thousands of former college athletes who say the now-defunct NCAA rules prevented them from earning endorsement money. So this is going to go all the way back to claims from athletes who had claims all the way back to 2016. So about 8 years ago.
Okay, wow.
For former athletes, you can now say, like, we were prevented from making money. But how do you know where to stop the claims? Is it just a statute of limitations kind of a thing?
Could be. And it's also difficult to prove what things that you didn't get, like opportunities that didn't materialize. That can be a tough thing to actually prove.
Also, if you're outside of the US, this is one of the most difficult things to explain to people in other countries about the US is the university sports and just how big of a moneymaker university sports is in the US. Here, when I try to explain what a college football team is to someone here, they're like, there's so many things I don't understand about this. Not to mention the fact that the word college and the word football are both used completely differently in the UK.
Yes, completely different contexts. And so we find ourselves tripping over them quite a bit. Just quick follow-up on Dune. It was a 2000 television miniseries. It was, I believe, 3 episodes. It was the one starring William Hurt.
Oh, William Hurt. Wow. Okay.
And Alec Newman. And it was on Sci-Fi.
It was on Sci-Fi.
It was an international co-production between American cable network Sci-Fi and companies in Germany, Canada, and Italy.
You remember the hot minute when Sci-Fi, the Sci-Fi channel, rebranded as Sci-Fi?
No, yes, I do. The SYFY.
Yeah.
You know what? They had some great series. I want to say Sci-Fi is where things like Warehouse 13 were airing, and those were just like really fun. Like
was
kinda
not
like
Eureka also on
Eureka,
there?
which I adored. Like just very fun kind of like sci-fi stuff. It was great. I loved it.
Battlestar Galactica as well.
Super duper fun.
Yep. Huge fun series.
It's the lightest hearted of all the Galacticas.
A lighthearted romp through the galaxy. But what else is going on in the world today? I have one big thing that I want to talk about.
Okay,
today.
we have a couple of things. Some people tried to steal Graceland.
Yeah, what is up with
Elvis's
that?
house. So this is an interesting thing. I've been hearing about it through the week. The first thing that I heard was that Graceland was going to go to auction under foreclosure. And
How can someone just not buy Graceland? Like, there's got to be some super rich Elvis
who could just throw in a ton of money for Graceland. Sure. So what happened was this company alleged that Lisa Marie Presley took out a $3.5 million loan before she died and did not repay it and put Graceland up as collateral. So they were foreclosing and they were sending it to auction.
For $3.5 million bucks?
I know.
In this economy.
I know.
In this part of Tennessee.
And then the the granddaughter, Riley Coe, who currently, I guess owns it, said that was not a real loan. And was able to produce affidavits from the notary saying that she never notarized anything for Lisa Marie Presley and basically proved it was all fake.
Oh, wow, really?
The company doesn't exist. No one can find them. And so the Graceland was basically just saved from a fraud auction theft. Really weird stuff. I'll put some links in the link dump for those who want to read on. You can find that on our website, morningsomewhere.com. And it's really fascinating how Graceland, this like monument practically, it's the second most visited residence in the U.S. Can you guess what the first is?
No.
The White House.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's technically a residence.
Oh, I guess so. I've been to the White House.
You have indeed.
It was underwhelming.
Was it?
It was just like everything kind of bolted on everywhere. I think I talked about this before.
Maybe it's because I have to change the decor every 4 years.
I'll have to add this to my list of accolades, like the Emmy, Tesla owning. I was on the Obama administration. This is going to sound so stupid. Like the longer I talk, it's going to get dumber. I was on the Obama administration's special committee for communicating climate change issues to millennials and younger adults, but there was like millennials in there. And it was right at the end of the Obama administration. And I remember the last meeting we had, we all talked about how, when Hillary Clinton's administration comes in, we're going to have to make, some changes. We don't really know what's going to happen and things will change. And guess what? Different timeline. Somebody moved a chair. Trump administration took over. I never spoke to any of those people ever again. Like it was just gone. It was like
there and gone.
It was like, do you know that Thanos snap? It's like he did that and then smashed it with Thor's hammer. That was an interesting committee. I was in that committee with Cara Delevingne was part of that committee.
That's so strange.
It was one of the weirdest things I ever did. Yeah, and we had meetings like in a meeting room like right off the Oval Office. And then every now and then the door would open. Like that, it was so weird to be in that room and you knew which door led to the Oval Office. It was like a door that blended into the wall as well. And occasionally it would open and everybody would be like,
and then just, some poor secretary comes through and is like, coffee, anyone?
And I remember going to the restroom in the White House and there was a copy machine in the restroom. Like that's where.
What? Wait, hold on.
Well,
What?
you got to think how old the White House is, and it was built before all these different technologies. So where were they going to put the copier? Like everything was like stacked in the hallways, like all the stuff you see on the actual like. When you see like a press conference, like we got to stand or go visit the place where like they walk out down the red hallway and they make the announcement like we got him, or Osama bin Laden is dead or something like that, or like he died like a dog, or, various presidential announcements. We got to go up there, and all that stuff is amazing. But then when you go into the other areas, like the working areas, it's like.
Is it like beige paint and like linoleum floors?
It is. It's like you ever like that red brick tile that you have in like fast food restaurant kitchens. If you've ever worked in fast food, it's kind of like
that half of them are cracked.
Parts of it feel like that, honestly. And you're like, why is there a coating on this?
Why is there an air fryer in the closet?
Anyway, enough walk down memory lane. But
no, we have more walks down memory lane. Are you ready for the next one?
I just want to say, too, I want to follow up immediately on something you talked about. I recently saw a photo in their heyday, like at their peak. Not that these guys peaked. But it was one of the Mr. Universe competitions where it's Arnold Schwarzenegger standing next to Lou Ferrigno. Man, Lou Ferrigno is a huge man. Or back then, he was a huge man. He's still with us, but just an absolutely enormous dude. And you can tell Schwarzenegger's like way more cut. But Lou Ferrigno looks like something that stepped out of like a Game of Thrones novel.
Yeah, he was the Mountain before the Mountain.
God, you get why he played the Hulk. Like they had to cast a dude. Luckily, they had Lou Ferrigno. And they had him there.
They're like, thank God you're here.
Did I ever tell you about the time we saw Lou Ferrigno at a convention, Jeff and I?
Tell me.
We were just like, we had set up our booth and we were like walking around and just before, everyone gets on the floor, just walking around looking. And Lou Ferrigno was setting up his autograph booth. And he had a banner saying, meet Lou Ferrigno.
Was it a Bruce?
What's a Bruce?
Banner?
Oh. No, I've actually gotten that joke because we watched him. He didn't even need a ladder or stand on anything. He just goes over and like reaches up to the top of it and pins up the corner. And then the other corner fell down. And then he goes and grabs that corner, lifts it up, pins it up. And then the first corner falls down to the ground. And he goes, and I just go under my breath and go, don't get mad. And of course, we were so starstruck, we didn't go help or anything like that, But it would have been great. We should have been, helpful and helped Lou Ferrigno.
Well, yeah, but it would have had to be like you put Jeff on your shoulders to help. I mean, what are you guys going to do, really?
It would have been like, Jeff and I would have walked up and been like, hey, Mr. Ferrigno, really great to meet you.
Do you need any help?
Boy, if you were born after like 1995, this podcast is like... It's not going to pertain to you at all.
Well, let's lean into this because big news, Atari
Huge
has
news.
ended the console war. Atari has officially acquired Intellivision.
They have. That was the drop at the beginning of this episode was Intellivision, which was who made Intellivision. This just shows who were the big video game players back in the early 80s, do you think? So Atari, everybody knows that name. There was a little company called Coleco that had the ColecoVision.
Intellivision was Mattel.
Yeah, right. Mattel Electronics. Yeah.
So, but
the same people who made Barbie made Intellivision.
Which is interesting because there was a period where Atari was owned by Hasbro.
Right. Well, Atari went through a wild run. So Atari was everything. The Ataris were huge. Everyone had an Atari 2600. The real deal was that arcades were absolutely enormous. Do you know who one of the first ever, though, consoles to the home companies were? Who like one of the most major players in early video game consoles was?
Who?
You'll never guess it. Magnavox.
Oh, you know what? Was that the ColecoVision?
Yeah, the Magnavox Odyssey. No, they had like the Pong sets.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, they were.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Odyssey was a really cool one that looked a little bit like a mini PC. The really rich kids had those, and they had a Lord of the Rings style game on. I think it was called Quest for the Ring, and so it just goes to show, like even that property early on, people recognized like the power of it and everything. But a television was so fucking cool. It had a controller. It had the worst controller in the world. It was like a disc, and it had two hard buttons on the side. Like you couldn't even depress them. You just pressed them in, like they were part of the plastic housing. But then it had a keypad, so you could do lots of different stuff. Like they had a great baseball game on that. The thing we played before, it had the first time I ever heard a computer talk was the IntelliSpeak unit, was an add-on unit that some games, and one of them was B-17 Bomber, where it would talk to you. And I thought that was the craziest
Like this
thing
is
I'd
the
ever
true
heard.
future.
I couldn't believe it. A computer could talk. That was insane to me. And and so Atari got to be the biggest thing. I think it's like lost to time a little bit, but Atari was so big that when ET came out, they made, in Pac-Man, they made more cartridges than there were Atari units out in the world.
Because they thought it was going to be such a huge seller.
They were just trying to project how far out this Atari was going to take off. And then between 1983 and 1985, the video game industry, I'm not kidding, it disappeared. It was like a fad.
I want to say it was like a
Pet Ross.
96%
Yep.
drop or something like that. It was a huge percentage that the industry just completely crashed through the basement floor.
Like imagine if social media went away completely, like dropped 98% or 97% in 2 years. And you're like, well, that was cool. That was weird.
Yeah, it's world changing, really.
Yeah.
And then as a result of that crash, Atari was actually sold off to a company that I'd never heard of called Trammell Technologies, which basically bought it and took the name.
And this is so weird that this came up because we were just talking about that this week where Atari was purchased at some point by Infogrames and rebranded.
Yeah, did we manifest, Bernie? We might have manifested.
You're welcome, in television shareholders. I wish it was
like
numbers
the
on this.
Story. This is the story with Atari as well, is the number of companies that buy it just to take the name. First of all, the weird thing in there was a reverse merger, which I don't know what that is, with a company called JT Storage in 1996.
A reverse merger is when, the simplest way to say it is when a private company buys a public company, a company that's already gone through the filings to be public. So you buy the public company, usually that's in trouble, so that then you can assume its identity to have a public facing company now.
Oh, without having to like do your own filings and stuff.
Right. It's a time-consuming procedure, especially in the U.S., to become a public company. So you can just buy a public company and assume it, essentially, as a shell company.
All right. Well, I guess that's what happened there. That was then pretty quickly sold off again, though, to Infogrames, which is, I think, where a lot of the like modern gamers will have picked up the saga.
Infogrames is such a weird brand because it's a video game company called Infogrames. It must be a French word that I don't know what it is.
It's gotta be. I don't know what it means, but it's gotta be French.
Also, if I recall correctly, their logo is an armadillo, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I want to say it's an armadillo. And the game that I remember, you remember?
It does look like an armadillo. What?
Is it not an armadillo?
It looks like an armadillo to me.
Yeah. And this is back from like the Amiga era, like the early 90s, late 80s. But they made a title called Alone in the Dark, which was the only Infogrames title that I ever remembered. But somehow ended up with Atari.
Interesting.
And then
That's
didn't
so
they
weird.
take then once Infogrames got it, didn't they go, oh, somebody else bought them and said, oh, you got this Atari brand? We're just going to rebrand the company as Atari.
Yes. So they took a couple of divisions. It renamed this is from all on the Wikipedia, by the way. It renamed the division Atari Interactive, and then another IESA division, Infogrames, changed its name to Atari Inc. It's messy. The Atari Inc. and Atari Game stuff is just such a mess. Oh, and then also filed for bankruptcy.
But the big deal now is that somehow, I don't know the path for Intellivision, but now Intellivision has been purchased by Atari, which for really, really old school gamers, that's a big deal. That's like if...
That was the original console war.
Remember Nintendo was going to buy Sega for a long time? Like there was the talk that was going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been a big deal for 90s kids. Like if Nintendo finally won, they bought Sega, or if somehow in the future Sony acquired Xbox, like 50 years from now.
Yeah, and then
you'd be like, I remember
all the
God
gamers
of
in the
War.
retirement home are like, finally they won.
Finally, Halo on my PS12.
Justice.
Yeah, so look for the Atari like 89,000. It's going to be releasing Tron Deadly Disc. Another great Intellivision game was Swords and Serpents, I think it was. This was all cartridge-based stuff. There was a cool digital release where they re-released a bunch of the Intellivision games. And for whatever reason, I don't know who did this. I talked about this years ago on the RT podcast. They did like a brief history lesson on each game. Like
That's really
before
cool,
you loaded
actually.
the game up. It was so fucking cool. And what I didn't know was a lot of these games, like B-17 Bomber, was made by one person, one programmer. They made the game. It was a team of like 10 people that worked at the whole company. And this was their project. They made the game. They shipped it off because it was a cartridge. It wasn't software. Like they weren't burning it to disk. They were going and manufacturing chips with the game on it. So while they waited for it to be manufactured, then they tested it.
I remember that was a fairly common thing, which is why some of those games, they would also write workarounds for bugs in the manuals.
Or they would find a killing bug, like a kill screen bug, and go like, "Oh, if you do this,
Look,
then
Easter egg.
then you won." Essentially,
or they would also like hide initials and things like that, around in the games, because a lot of times I think the people who actually made them were uncredited. It's a fun story, the early video game industry.
It really is. It really is. What was your we'll end on this. What was the first video game you ever played?
It was definitely Super Mario Brothers.
Really, Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Bros. I got for Christmas, me, my brother, and sister, we got a Nintendo. It was the 3-game cartridge with Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and World Track Meet, whatever it was. The one that came with the power pad.
Yeah.
The power pad, which you would immediately like cheat and just like pound your fists on the feet to run really, really fast, that kind of thing.
Yeah, cheating. It's still getting all the energy out of kids. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, don't do that.
You know what I got to say? That pad where kids would run on it, I never heard about those breaking ever. Like, I would assume that would have been broken on like December 27th. They would have all been broken.
Now, they must have been manufactured in the same factories as like tanks.
Right. It's like a buy it for life. Like, I'm pretty sure you could probably buy one of those pads today and it would be just fine.
You gotta find it, and now it's going to be brown because that's the color that all things from that era turned. They turn that weird brown color,
that nicotine brown, basically. Yeah. I'm so old. First video game that I ever played. This is like such a short window of time. At a Benihana restaurant, I saw a cocktail table version of Space Invaders. And now when I say a cocktail version of it, they used to have these things that I'm surprised didn't come back as like hardcore retro. It was a table that had a video game in the top of it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Okay.
I think they tried to bring them back.
They were huge at pizza
several
restaurants
years ago, but they are kind of a bulky thing to commit to.
Yeah, but they were smaller than a regular table. Like, it was like you would look down at the tabletop and then it was
the
controls on
were
your
like
side.
buttons on top. It was like an arcade machine, but flat.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was, and I'm surprised those haven't been a thing or like a major collectible.
Yeah, I think they tried, but maybe they just, you get one game per, and they're not quite as cute as arcades.
All right, Ash. Well, I think that does it for us this week. Anyone to thank for today's episode?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes, I would like to thank Daniel L. and Chris Lusk for sponsoring this episode of Morning Somewhere. Thank you both for being patrons.
All right, and we don't know exactly what we're going to be doing on the Patreon this weekend, patreon.com/morningsomewhere. We're going to go watch Furiosa, and we might talk about that too, but we'll kind of split it up into like a mini episode so that we don't like have a whole full spoiler for people who aren't going to go see Furiosa.
Yeah.
But we'll have something up on the Patreon this week. All right, well, that does it for us this week, ending May 24th, 2024. We will be back to talk to you on Monday. We hope you'll be here as well.
Bye, everybody.